Good morning, Professor Ashtekar. How are you?
I'm fine. And you?
I'm good, sir. I'm good. Good to see you again,
Yeah,
sir.
good to see you. I was in conference last week. I was away. I just got back on the yeah on the
Oh, great. Thank you for making time for this second conversation. In our previous session, we explored your formative years in India and your early education and the influences that shaped your initial interest in physics. Today, I would like to build on that foundation and learn more about your journey through graduate studies. So let's begin where we left last time, sir. So after completing your undergraduate studies or during the undergraduate studies during that time, when you were in college in India, what options did you consider for further education?
right. So I started thinking about this when I was in my final year of BSc. So the fourth year of undergraduate studies in those days, right? I think the system had changed a little bit since then. So in those days, one got one's high school graduation between 15 and 16, and then one finished one's undergraduate between 19 and 20, basically. So, so this was a so I was between 18 and 19 when I started thinking about various options. I think I mentioned to you last time about my uh, uh, fortunate incident that the people in Tata Institute became interested,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Particularly Professor
Yes.
Udgaonkar, Professor Yashpal, and Professor S.M. Chitre.
Mm.
So I was a little bit exposed to glimpses of international research, and so I thought that maybe I should go abroad to
Mm-hmm.
for my graduate studies.
Mm.
So I mean, in those days there was no internet and there was no way of knowing what all is available. So the way that one did was to go to the what was then called USIS, that is to say United States Information Service, which is a small branch
Mm-hmm.
of the U.S. consulate in Mumbai. And so
Mm-hmm.
I went there, and they used to have these brochures from various universities. So I looked at the physics ones, and these reasons I mentioned to you about cosmology and general relativity, I was interested in relativity and gravitation and cosmology and such things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to focus on those issues. Now, I think it may not be so clear to people at this stage now, but in those days, general relativity and gravity and even cosmology were not the
Mm-hmm.
forefront fields. The forefront
Mm-hmm.
fields were in particle physics in those days, particularly, and of course, condensed matter physics, which in India we used to be called solid state physics. Various
Mm-hmm.
interface between experiment and theory, particularly, was very, very strong. So these were the kind of leading fields, and not every university in the United States had a group doing research in general relativity or cosmology. I mean, very, very few had. And among the brochures I found, there was only two. One was Maryland, University of Maryland, which had a sizable group, and actually it was a good group, and University of Texas, which had the biggest group. I mean, they really had no names that I had even vaguely heard of. I mean, it's sort of big people, and at that stage I did not know, but leading researchers internationally, not just American ones, because there was also people from Germany, people from England, and so on. So just I applied to just these two places. It was quite expensive because even the small application fee one had to get those converted to dollars and
Yeah.
all those things. Uh, so I just applied to these two places, and almost I not immediately returned mail, but very quickly got a reply from Maryland saying that they don't consider in students from India for PhD or graduate work unless they have masters, and I was only going to have bachelor's, and I was applying when I did not even have bachelor's. I was in my last year of bachelor's, so
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. I mean, so they basically said, well, you can apply in 2 years. But the University of Texas, for some reason, admitted me. I'm sure that letter
Definitely.
from
Definitely.
Feynman and probably also letters that Udgaonkar and S.M. Chitre wrote from the Tata Institute for me were the main reasons.
Mm,
I should say that this was the late 60s, 69 precisely.
mm,
And those were the
mm.
boom years for Texas with respect to oil. And so a lot of oil revenue was coming into Texas, and therefore some small percentage of the profits or the revenue that was coming into the state treasury was allocated to the university, and therefore the university was
Okay.
expanding a lot. At that
Hmm.
time, I came to know this later. Of course, I did not know this when I was a
Mhm.
student. At that time, there was a very influential physicist by name Alfred Schild. He was American
Mhm.
physicist, but he was very left-wing politics, but still he was very vocal and very persuasive. And so he had a lot of clout in the University of Texas Senate and various places. And he managed to
Mhm.
get a lot of these funds. And so he created the largest, it was called Center for Relativity, which is in
Mhm.
general relativity, that's what they meant. The largest group there. So of course Alfred Schild himself was the director of that. But then you got Juergen
Mhm.
Ehlers, who founded the Albert Einstein Institute in Germany many years later.
Uh,
Then there was Engelbert Schucking, who went on to New York University, and he was a leading cosmologist. There was Rainer Sachs, who had laid foundations of gravitational radiation theory together with Sir Armand Monti in King's College in London. Ray Sachs was a former student of Peter Bergman's, who himself was an assistant to Einstein. So, there was a real pedigree here. I mean, these people were very, very leading physicists. And then in the second year that I was there, uh, a very bright young person just joined the faculty, and that was
mm,
Bob Garrosh, Robert Garrosh.
mm.
And Garrosh had the kind of distinction, I think, that he got his PhD from John Wheeler in Princeton, and
Oh.
then he went to a postdoc with Roger Penrose Roger used to be in London in those days. And then he came back to United States and had one other additional year of postdoc at Syracuse with Peter Bergman, who was a former assistant of
Mm.
Einstein. And then after just 3 years after his PhD, he got a tenured associate professorship in Austin. This is totally unheard of now. I mean, now it's just hopeless, but even in those days, it was completely unheard of, because people usually got at that stage,
Go for.
yeah, an assistant professor, and then there's a tenure process for 7 years, and so at the sixth year you got promoted and tenure and such things. So in his third year after PhD, he was a tenure professor. He was considered to be extremely bright and everything. So this and then their astronomy department was also very, very good. And there was a person by
Oh.
name Debacular, who was a leading astronomer. I'll tell a few things about that in later. And so the group was incredibly lively. And then there are postdocs. Some of them had come from England, and the
Mm.
students were also quite often very good. So, anyways, I was lucky. I mean, I got to see this brochure, applied, and that was a good choice. And so they admitted me with the financial support to be a teaching assistant. So I accepted. In those days, everything was quite difficult. It took quite some time to get you on your passport, and of course, the airline ticket was
Mm.
expensive. We are not
Mm.
from a rich family. I mean, my father was well-to-do, but so I had to
Mm.
raise money for even the air ticket. Right, it was not
Yeah.
cheap in the salaries that people got,
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
and of
And
course,
you already mentioned about principles of your father, and
yeah,
uh,
right,
the.
yeah,
So I can understand. Sir. Yes. Yes.
yeah. So basically, I mean, I was reasonably outgoing. So I found some places, some foundations which actually gave money. Some of it was loan, which I returned. Some of it was just outright money for travel to go up. So I got
And
some funds in order to. So I did not have to impinge on my parents for that. And in those days, the foreign exchange was very, very controlled. Believe it or not, but the dollar was only 7.5 rupees. Therefore, for students, they allowed $200 through Reserve Bank of India. So you have to apply through a bank. And of course, one had to figure out all these things. But in India, one had enough network, even though there was no internet, to find this thing out. So I got this $200, and then at the airport, as you are exiting, they gave us $8. so
okay.
so I had exactly $208 in my pocket when I started out, and that's the only money I had. And of course,
Uh,
there was no way of getting any money from India or anything. And looking back, it seemed very adventurous, but in those days, it looked a very normal thing to do. I should say that I had also appeared for what they call the GREs, graduate record exam,
mm.
but only advanced
Mm.
physics test. And I didn't
Mm.
do spectacularly well, but I did reasonably well. I mean, these are
Mm.
supposed to be for undergraduates, last year of people doing their bachelor's in United States, and they are 22.
mm,
So they have had 2 more years of education. So it's like really master students in India.
mm,
Uh, but
mm.
it was I got a respectable score. So then I think in August or September of 1969, I flew to
69.
Austin. It was the first trip abroad outside India. It was quite a
Mm,
experience, I have to say, landing in Austin.
mm,
But people were very, very nice. I mean, the university had arranged for me to be picked up at the airport and
oh,
take me to a place for a temporary housing. It was not cheap,
mm,
right? I mean, of course, it was subsidized, but still, it was not cheap. I don't know, something like
mm.
$15 a day or something. But I only had $208, so you have to worry
Oh,
about those
okay.
things. You have to find quickly some accommodation and so on. So it was quite a
And how was the shift once you moved to US from India? Culturally, these are two like completely different places, right? So there is a cultural shift, and things which might not be normal in India might be very normal in the US. So how did you react to that, and how was your initial days up and at Austin?
UT Austin. In those days, there are two things, right? Three things, actually.
Mm,
One was I was outside India. The second is that I was not in some place like Chicago or International or Boston or New York or something like that. I was in Austin. And Austin is, of course, it's still an island within Texas, but nonetheless, it's Texas. So there was a strong Texan culture, which is not just US culture, but a Texan culture. And then, this was 1969. So this was just around the days of, the student movements and everything all over the country. 1969 to
mm,
73 or so, there was big student movements, and uh, there was a lot of people on drugs, on marijuana, and so on.
mm.
So the main
Oh,
avenue in front of the university, the students would hang around on their marijuana trip. So the Texan culture was, I finally, okay, I should go back a little bit. So when I was looking for an apartment, there was discrimination against non-white people, and so it's
mm.
not
Oh,
easy to get those. In retrospect, this completely countryside people were
mm,
the ones who were prejudiced, right? But then, if I finally, through networking with other Indian students, I I found a place because it was being vacated by another Indian family. So therefore, there was a small
oh,
apartment that I could get in, and the landlords were very kind. I think their name was Kohler. He was a captain in the army, and they had their own house, and behind the house they had a small building where they had created 3 apartments. So I had one of those apartments. It was, for me, completely comfortable. It was perfectly nice. But most importantly, it was only 15 minutes walk to my department. So it was very, very
from
pleasant.
the
And the
mm,
weather in Austin was very pleasant. It was not super cold or anything like that. So since I came after 20, so students in my class were 2 years older than me, because almost all of them were 22. And so
mm,
I did not have enough background. And so I really had to work extremely hard, particularly during those 2 years in
mm,
Austin. And I remember distinctly
mm,
that my glasses, the number changed, right? It was around 0.50 or something diopters, the usual measure, to 4.50 or 4.75. In just those 2 years, I work extremely hard.
oh,
Like, I don't know how many hours a day, but I was very
mm,
motivated because there was so much to learn and so many different directions.
mm,
I was taking
mm,
my regular course load, and I was also teaching assistant. So I had to grade papers or
mm,
you know do problem sessions with undergraduates and so on. So it was a very, very, very hectic period. But luckily, that is what helped in answer to your question about this culture shock. I just did not have
mm,
time or energy to absorb the culture shock. I was so focused,
mm.
completely focused on this work, that this was a bit surprised. But then you have to have some relaxed attitude or some leisure to compare and be
Mm.
shocked. But if you are
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
working so hard, then some ways it is easier, because then you're insulated by that.
There's no bandwidth to think about those things. It's
Exactly.
like completely.
Exactly. No time or energy to think about, or no interest in to think about. So one of the big culture shock, if you like, was uh, since this place was not very far from the university, There are also things which are called fraternities and sororities in the United States. So these are kind of private associations. They're named after Greek. There's a Greek idea. The old idea comes from Greeks, but now it is basically a social thing for rich people. Often it is, not always, but often. And so on the weekends, the boys and the girls, the sorority girls only dated the fraternity boys because they were certain social class and such thing. And on one weekend, I saw this fraternity boys in a Texas way, wearing cowboy hats, big cowboy boots, came riding horses on the streets. That rented the horses. So horses came in, these wagons, and then so the whole ceremony was that they would ride up to the balcony of the sorority and pick up the girl, and the girl was standing in the balcony. So it was, as I said, it was like a Bollywood movie or something. It was quite a interesting thing. Anyway, so these were the kind of cultural differences.
Yeah, so when you moved to UT Austin, one thing that I want to understand is in terms of physics, what kind of problems you are working at that time? What was your interest? Like, what areas of physics you are trying to master and you were trying to spend more time?
So, I mean, just to sort of illustrate this also to younger people who might want sometime listen to these things. The very first time that I went to the physics department, I mean, it's now in a big building, but it was an old building at that time, and and it had many of these steps, and I was walking up these steps, and then there was a big door, and then you open, and then you enter the department. So I walked up those steps, opened this big door, entered the department, and then there was a big corridor, and with polished floor, left hand side, right hand side, and they're all marked lab this, lab that, etc. And I felt, well, I should not disturb anybody, and so I just walked out. I did not even, you know, explore the
Okay.
building because I thought, wow, these guys are doing serious work, and here I am, basically not knowing anything, and I should not. So this kind of awe is
Was
what I entered. So it's good to understand the psychological state, so to say, this mixture of the fact that coming from India and that I was only 20, so I felt I was behind everybody, and so. Um, so to answer to your question, then so I got quite good advising. I also talked to other Indian students there. They all had come after masters, so they were a little bit worried about me. One had to take 3 courses every semester. So the first semester, I took one undergraduate course in mathematical methods and 2 graduate level courses. And in the second semester on, I just took graduate level courses. So at that, I mean, I went there, as I mentioned, because I was interested in gravity and cosmology. But of course, in order to reach the research level, you have to have some firm foundations. And so I had to learn basically classical mechanics, electrodynamics, quantum mechanics, mathematical methods. So those are the courses I took in the first year. And I mean, very quickly I got straight A's, and so I felt that I was keeping up. I had to work very, very hard. There's just no question about it. That these things didn't come easy. I think people should realize that it's not just
Okay.
but I did catch up. I mean, in the first year, I more or less managed to catch up with my peers. And my second year, I was still doing well. And then I was again very fortunate, right? I really feel very lucky and I'm grateful. I had a young person teaching quantum mechanics. He was from Portugal, and he's gone back. He became professor in Portugal, and he taught quantum mechanics in a different way, not in the standard traditional way, slightly different way about emphasizing certain methods, certain aspects, and so on. And I really loved it. I got into it very quickly, and so on. And so, in almost every course, I got the highest grades and so on. And also, I was very lucky because Alfred Schild, the director of this relativity center, he was teaching us electrodynamics. And so I took his course. And because I took his course and I did very well, so then he offered me what they call research assistantship. So I did not have to grade papers or teach. I could just take courses and think about research and topics. So that happened already in the second year. And that I think was very, very, I mean, that was very good for me. So then in the second year, I basically, and Alfred also gave me an office in the relativity center. And Then he
Mhm.
went on a sabbatical, and therefore his office was empty. And I don't know. Again, I was incredibly lucky. I mean, he had the largest
Mhm.
office, right? Biggest thing. So he had two desks, and he said, "Well, why don't you take one of the desks while I was sabbatical?" And the other desk was given to somebody who was just freshly joined assistant professor, so faculty member. I mean, I was a lowly graduate student, which was so. Again, I was extremely lucky, and I got to know the faculty a little bit better then. And I also took courses from these very, very leading people like Juergen Ehlers. He was a master teacher, and he knew all of physics, so well, so deeply. I mean, later, he became the director of the Albert Einstein Institute, and then when he retired, he tried to recruit me to become the director of to take his place.
Mhm.
But our association
Yeah.
started in 1970 already. Me being a graduate student, just to give an illustration. I mean, again, a
Mhm.
reality check to
Mhm.
younger people, how hard
Mhm.
one had to work and so on. So in the second year, I already took a course in general relativity, which was a
Mhm.
graduate level course. And it was a lot of work, right? It was not easy to, do all these jumps. There was a lot of reading assignments, and I think that the professor was not pedagogical. I mean, his attitude was more or less throw things at you, and
Mhm.
it's your job to pick up.
Correct.
And so it was not easy. I mean, I had to I mean, other courses also had to work hard, but they were more systematic and it was regular. Whereas this was general relativity, which was kind of a advanced topic. In those days, there
Yeah.
weren't any textbooks or anything that one could follow, so it was really
Mhm.
quite hard. So I remember distinctly, Organ Ellis was teaching a course in group theory. I was taking it, a fantastic course, and I
Mhm.
sheepishly went to him and said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I had so many assignments due, and so I was
Mhm.
literally staying up till that night and such thing. So
Oh.
I know how to do these problems, but it will take me a few hours to write down the solutions. Can I please submit it a
Mhm.
bit late?" And Jurgens then looked at me. He's very authentic German, Prussian actually, because he comes from Hamburg. He looked at me and said,
Mhm.
"Okay, this time, but don't make it a habit." And I felt
Yeah.
so bad from that.
Uh-huh.
So of course, I told Jurgen later when he offered, we became friends. He was my mentor, and he was very gracious. I mean, of course, there was a big age difference between the two of us. I, I mean, just to say, these were not easy times, right? And so I felt both
Mhm.
upset, and I had to submit the homework the same day. So I mean, there were such incidents. I mean, it was not smooth sailing by any means, right? I
Mhm.
mean,